Welcome to the Everyone Has a Story podcast. It's the new year, new year. Right. We go through this same thing day in and day out every year. New Year's resolutions, I've got new dreams, I have new aspirations, but for some reason, they're typically the same ones year after year after year. And for some reason, we fail. 92% of people who designate a New Year's resolution fail. So we're talking new year, new you, but why does it have to be New Year's? Why can't it be some other time? You know, we have dreams all 365 days of the year. Why do we wait till January 1st to start living a dream and start pursuing a dream? And there's sometimes throughout that year, we're going to get hit with an obstacle. So my story today is me actually getting hit. I grew up where my dad put me in every sport. I was in football, baseball, basketball, you name it. If it was a guy sport, I was there. And one time at bat, the last game of the season before we went to the All-Star series, I swung in an inside pitch and I broke my hand. And exactly. And so that next year, my season ended right then and there. So that next year in school, I signed up for the baseball team, which I was a very good player on that team the year before. Looking forward to playing baseball again. But what I found out was that when I went up to the plate to practice batting, somewhere in the back of my head, I was fearful. I was so fearful that I would step away every time the pitcher made his windup. And so my coach tried everything. I mean, he literally tried everything. He had put bats behind my feet. So every time I stepped back, I would fall down. But I'd rather fall down and be embarrassed than get hit by that damn ball again. I couldn't get over it. So lo and behold, I get introduced to the game of tennis, which is played at the same time of the year as baseball by a very, very good friend. And so we went out and we played a little bit and I did really well. So he said, you should try out for the tennis team. So I did. I went out for the tennis team and I made the tennis team. But what I found out was that this tennis coach was only coached by title. He really did not teach us anything about tennis. He just kind of was our babysitter. And then what we found out was that when I got into high school and I'm progressing as a tennis player, I now became better tennis player, but my coach did not help me at all because he is more like, a guy that just put the team together, made the lineup, got us on our way, but he really didn't help with our tennis. And I really didn't understand what I was messing out in because I diligently and disciplined, with a lot of discipline, I kept playing tennis. I'd hit against the wall. This was before tennis clubs were in our area, before ball machines were introduced to us. So I kept, anytime I could, I'd go down to the local school, hit against the wall, and just practice, because I loved the game of tennis, but I liked getting better and better. And then I got a tennis scholarship. I go to the college, and my coach really was a very, very good tennis player, and he was a very, very good coach. He was a full coach. And I realized how much I was missing. And, back then there was no manual on how to learn how to play tennis on your own. And so a lot of us moving forward, if you don't have that ideal manual that you can trust, if you don't have that coach, that person that you can count on, that you really trust, that's going to help you get from point A to point B, you're missing out. And those obstacles are always going to be presented. I don't care what you do in your life, who you are, where you're coming from, you're always going to be faced with obstacles where it's nice to have that resource. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, because my guest speaker today, she wrote a book called Coach Yourself, because there's a lot of people out there who know they need coaching. Maybe they're Their ego won't let them do it. They don't want to be known for the person who needs coaching, whatever, because sometimes in our society, we are all been told that you need to know how to do it yourself. You need to be able to, survive by yourself on your own. And that's not always the case. That's why we have GPS systems in our car. We have that ability to plug in a destination, and that GPS takes us on a safe route to that. And you can even put in those fancy little dials in there in settings where if I don't want to go through traffic, if I don't want to go through tolls, if I want to go the scenic route or the fast route, they can help you with that. And there's nothing wrong with that. Our lives are busy. Some people call them busy, some people call them full, but at the end of the day, our schedules are full. And so we need that expert advice that you can trust. And that's who my guest speaker is today, Antonia Bowring. Welcome and thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Roger. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so you are the author of Coach Yourself, but you're also the principal at AB Strategies. Tell us a little bit more about you and really what you do.
Well, I might say that is the longest introduction to a podcast that I have experienced. And I loved it. It's nice to start with a fable. It gets us in the right mood. I am an executive coach. I've been doing it for a decade after a career in management consulting and C-suite spots in organizations. And this is what I was born to do. And it was my first book in 2023. Yeah, now we're in 2024. And it's been a terrific ride, and the ride continues.
Well, I'm glad that your ride stopped here at this station for the next half hour. So let's get started. You've talked about your clients are executives. There's a lot of different definitions for an executive. Tell us really in more detail who those executives are.
So just to be clear, the book was written for anyone, but primarily for people who cannot afford executive coaching or it's not available to them. So it's in a way democratizing executive coaching. The people who I work with one-on-one or leadership teams, there's a broad spectrum, but my sweet spot is early stage high growth companies, a lot of founders, and I work with, I would say, more women than men. And I also work with leaders who are neurodiverse, ADHD primarily, and sectors. I mean, I'm in New York City, so there's tech, finance, but really runs the gamut. And I have what I also call a low bono practice, where I work with a couple of large international nonprofits and coach their leaders.
So let's talk about that coaching. What is it that you actually do for these individuals?
Yeah, well, first of all, if someone contacts me, there's usually some pain that they don't call when things are going hunky-dory. So there's a problem or a challenge. And what I do is I help identify with them what the goal is, what's the result we want to, or the solution we want to achieve. And then I help them get there through the coaching process.
And so you kind of talked about you want to be available for more than just executives. So you wrote the book.
Yeah.
Why? Why do you have that inspiration, that reason, that purpose to help everybody, not just the people that can afford your coaching?
Yeah, that's a very thoughtful question. Well, I think it goes to chapter 5 of my book. What are your values? If you don't know your values, how do you have a North Star? And my North Star is to be in service. That's one of my core values. And I am in service to my clients. And I wanted a larger platform because I kind of looked around and went, hey, there's about a dozen frameworks I use over and over and over again in these executive coaching engagements. And I'd like to make those accessible to other people who maybe don't have a company that supports executive coaching, maybe not at their level, or doesn't have a budget at all, or can't afford it themselves, because I do work with some individuals that come to me who are not sponsored by their companies. But I want to make these tools that I know and my clients know work, and I want to make those available to others and kind of serve them up in a DIY way, do it yourself way, so that you can utilize them yourself, these powerful frameworks, even if you don't have your own coach.
And thank you for that. So you know when people, professionals like you, make that change, they kind of put a pivot in their business, and in this case their coaching. There was a reason. You have a tipping point that said, you know what, I want to serve more. I want to give back to more people. And this is how I'm going to do it, by writing this book.
Yeah. Well, I will give you the very frank answer, which is my publisher Wiley called and said, do you want to write a book? And I had not honestly considered writing one. I was writing a lot of articles. I think that's how Wiley found me. But, I didn't really think anybody would be that interested. And I'm so glad Wiley called, because that was a tipping point in writing the book. And Wiley's enthusiasm for, let's get this DIY sort of coach yourself ethos and practical guide out there. And I'm so happy I made that investment of time.
And so am I, and so will the people who read your book after they hear this podcast. And sometimes, and even like you, a coach, you don't realize how powerful your words are and your methodologies are until someone of, like this case, someone of importance says, you know what, you need to share this with more people because it is going to be very beneficial for them. So I'm going to go back to a term that you said earlier, hunky dory. I've always loved that phrase, and quite honestly, today especially, we need more moments of being hunky dory in our lives. Personal and professional, and right now, there's a lot of people out there who are very loud. They're very noisy. They're very loud. They're not even anywhere close to being hunky dory, at least our version of hunky dory, and they desperately need it. They might not know they want it, but they need it, because you can just hear and feel, how miserable they are. So why should this book, the principles, the coaching that you put in front of us, that framework, why do you think it's so important today to help people get to this feeling of hunky-dory?
Well, I would actually say, I'm just looking in my book, I'm trying to find the right chapter. I think it's, wait, what chapter is it? 7. I actually think that what you just said is really important. And I have a framework about it, which is the actor spectator framework, chapter 7, that if we are miserable, and I want to be careful here, because we're probably, if we're listening to this podcast, we're privileged people, right? there are people who do not have many options in life, right? And
Yep.
I want to be
Yep.
very careful that there's no toxicity in what I'm saying.
Exactly.
And coaches are never supposed to say but, and we do all have the ability to be actors in our lives. And as I have grown older and wiser, I believe that more and more. And we may all not have the same sort of genetic disposition for that, but we can make progress on that spectrum. And to move out of a mindset of everything is being done to us, I can't control it. It's, oh, they did that to me, that the fault is always out there. To me, means you are living a life that lacks consciousness and awareness and agency to help build your own future of purpose and passion. And it's really important to me that when I work with clients, you can use that framework in small things or big things. I always encourage my clients to remember that they always have choices. And even if that choice is only what they do with their own mindset. And so that's a long-winded answer to that's why I think even folks that come across as very negative can move along that spectrum of when they realize and recognize they have more agency than they may imagine, they can let go of some of that negativity.
So walk us through how someone can get a step closer to really being aware that they are lacking this.
What's this? Define the this for me.
Exactly what you're just talking about, how they are just missing out on really, the idea that there is help out there. It's okay to look for alternatives to
Okay. Or that they have agency. How do I? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, a couple of different things. I actually have a little handout of this framework, and there's a series of it's in the book, a series of questions under the spectator column and a series of questions on the actor column. And so I think visually it's really helpful to just see this juxtaposition. And I always also start with asking someone to think about perspectives, and they might have one perspective, but what might be others? What might that boss who seems to be riding you really hard and making your life miserable, what may be going on in her life? And how do you think about having more empathy and compassion? And even if that's too hard, curiosity about what else might be going on. And then I really ask you to say, well, what's your part in this? There is never a situation that is all one-sided, at least in my experience. What's your part? What are you getting from not changing this situation? Because you're getting something. It's filling a need. So, it's through those kinds of open-ended questions, and it may also become a role play, right? Well, if you were going to look at this differently and think about your own piece of this, your own optionality, let's do a role play with your manager or your leader. What might that look like? Or with your shareholders or whatever. So that's kind of off the top of my head, but
Yes.
It's a theme I bring up over and over in a coaching engagement.
So we've been talking about individuals, and we all know that an organization, a company, a business is made up of individuals. So does this apply, that what we've just discussed that you've shared very nicely and articulated very well, does it apply to the organization as well?
Can you say more?
Well, you just define how someone can make themselves to be more understandable on really the purpose of agency.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can an agency, an organization, do the same thing as a whole?
Um, I would need to think about that. I mean, my inclination would be to say yes, that at an organizational level, how do we think about our role in this, and how do we see opportunities in shifting economic conditions, environments, marketplaces? How do we take that, that macro environment, and how do we respond to it as agents? Yeah, I think you can extrapolate that to the organizational level. Sure.
Okay. And so you've told us how an individual, what some of the results, the real tangible results you can get when you follow these steps that you've delivered in your book. So what are some of the real results that you can see that the company, the organization will see as achievable results?
Well, if you have leaders who are more aware of their own tendencies that may be challenging to their direct reports or their teams, and then you see them change those behaviors. I mean, first of all, they are building a culture by embracing that personal change, and they are building a culture by their individual example. I think that's very important. And then secondly, there's lots of research on team dynamics and how you build psychological safety and authentic leadership. But if a leader's not humming, if a leader's not doing his or her their work, it's very difficult for their team to be whole and solid and motivated and firing on all cylinders. So individual work with leaders is really a starting point to having uh, team efficiency and effectiveness and trust.
So I'm going to pose a scenario for you. I have witnessed, especially in the small to middle-sized businesses, that leaders, and I'm not talking the owner, but I guess, really apply it to the owner as well, where the leaders are moved up because they are the next man in line. And they might have a good idea of the product or service that that company delivers, but
Yep.
they do not have a whole lot of history or skill set to be that effective leader.
Mm-hmm.
So how can someone who doesn't really understand their role, other than I was a very, very good frontline employee, I produced well, and that's why I got promoted. Now, how do I now become a coach and a mentor and a leader to the staff now that I have working for me to help deliver and produce whatever I'm in charge of?
Well, I would ask the question differently. The question I would ask is, what is the organization doing to prepare this person to take on new challenges? It's not, that's part A. And part B is, how is this individual seeking out feedback and professional development to build their own career and their own ladder. But for me, that's two parts. It is also the organization's responsibility to be preparing that pathway and seeing what this person is strong or has areas to build, and helping them build that skill set before the risks become much higher in just winging it.
Well, unfortunately, you're absolutely right. And there's absolutely no argument from the host of this podcast. But reality is, 82% of those small and middle-sized businesses are going to fail within the first 2 to 4 years. That's just the stat that gets slapped in my face every day.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is because they rush into a different professional path. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired at this place of employment, so I'm going to go out and start my own business because I can do a whole lot better than what I'm working for, who I'm working for. And so they walk in with the wrong intentions or wrong purpose, and now all of a sudden that dream of being their own boss, their own, write their own schedule and whatever, now becomes a nightmare because they're ill prepared. And so they start bringing up people up the ladder, but they don't know they're ill prepared because the culture is that everybody's ill prepared because no one has that understanding. So you've already hit the nail on the head that what they need to do is they need to get themselves, whatever stage of their business is, what you're saying is get yourself prepared to cultivate the right people within that organization, if that's what you choose. Or if you have to go outside the organization, know what you need from that person to be that ideal leader in whatever area that they're being hired for. And so really the best way to do that is buy your book, so that way they have an understanding of your steps and your principles, but then seek out someone like you or someone that can help them put it all together to make it more unified towards the overall intent of that business. So that way it's all aligned and it's more easy flowing, correct?
Yeah, I think the way I would summarize that is two things. What got you here won't get you there. That is the best title of any, management leadership book by Marshall Goldsmith. And you don't need the book, the title brilliantly says it all. And if you don't enter with that mindset, then you're in trouble. So that would be my first comment. And my second would be that if you're starting a business, and it doesn't have to be me, there's lots of amazing coaches out there, you should have a coach, period. And that might be more on the business side of things. But if you feel strong on the business side of things, but you're, have less experience managing large teams or scaling, there's lots of different kinds of coaches, but you need support, you need scaffolding, and you need someone who wants you to be successful, but who can be an objective mirror back to you. So I think that's critically important. And also how you show up leading, you can't let it all hang out, right? All the time. Yes, you need to be authentic. But you need to have a safe place where you can let it all hang out. And that's what you do with a coach. You do not do that with your team. You can let some of it out in an appropriate way, but the unfiltered, no, that's, I talk a lot about that with ADHD clients. Just being too emotionally volatile or emotionally dysregulated can be a real issue.
I, I implore everybody to get your book and to read this and to reach out to you. I can't thank you enough for these great words of advice. But before you leave, I want you to give us one more little bit of Antonia inspiration to help us find that hunky-dory moment.
Yeah, this has been on my mind for a couple of days. It's important to have big goals, and you have to bring them down to earth too. And first you have that brainstorming excitement phase, but then you have the messy middle where you need to be in a state of discomfort, I truly believe, while things settle a little bit and you ask questions, or your coach asks questions, or you journal or whatever. And then you need to land. And once you land, then you need to think about, what are those small steps that help me get to that, to complete that project, to see that idea through, to achieve that result. That and that all ladders back to good habits. I'll stop there.
I love that. I can't thank you again for being my guest. And if someone wants to reach out to you to learn more from you and with you, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Roger. On LinkedIn, Antonia Bowring. On my website, ab-strategies.com. And the book's available on Amazon, Coach Yourself. My name, Antonia Bowring, easy to find. Yeah, that'll do it.
Thank you again. And I just love your forthrightness and just your, you tell it the way it needs to be told. So thank you for that.
Oh, it's a real pleasure. I really enjoyed it. And I thought the questions were really, some of the first ones I've got. I've done a lot of podcasts at this point, and I always appreciate getting one I haven't heard before, because then it gets the brain thinking and learning for me.
Well, thank you again. My podcast wouldn't be the same if it wasn't for my sponsors and my great supporters. So let me take this opportunity to thank each and every one of them. First of all, I want to thank Rebecca at Custom Bookkeeping and Accounting, delivering trustworthy bookkeeping services since 2003. Dave and Dara at Virtues Matter, making this world a much happier place to be with their Virtues card apps, coaching, and workshops. Stephen at Buller Accounting, giving business owners depth and insight to their numbers. Eric and his team at Ivy Cat Web Design, the real superheroes of web development and design. Jennifer and Jean at the Seavers Real Estate Team, serving Pierce and Kitsap counties with their home buying and selling needs. Maury at the Maury Method, the world's only brainwave entrainment engineer, helping everyone have more clarity, less stress, and overall better brain health. Priya at Pivot My Profit, helping individuals and businesses have better control of their finances and more money at the end of their day. Melissa at the Soul Vibe Energy High, the queen of the aha moments, helping individuals find those holes in their cups, repair the hole, and gain back their positive energy. And finally, Rick at West Sound Recording. You talk, they do all the rest. Thank you, Rick, for all your efforts with the production and editing of my podcast.